For a long time, the dental business model was just simply get me to X amount of new patients and we're good. And that's totally changed. I was just on a podcast yesterday and we walked through why that's not the case anymore. Number one, labor costs are up. Number two, there's a hygiene shortage, so you can't just get more hygiene appointments. Number three, our cost of goods are up. Number four, patients are buying less and coming less frequently. Student debt is through the roof, so associates have to make a certain level of money, and that creates a whole nother level of complexity there.
Okay, I'm making 500 grand in hygiene. Great, that's amazing. But when you're spending 400 grand in order to get that 500 grand, now that 500 grand is a lot less amazing. And so taking these large language models, training it in all the data points and understanding kind of like, okay, if I pull this lever, here's what impacts these other tools. That's where the biggest opportunities really kind of come in and lie. Is like a lot of offices know what to do. They don't know the biggest impact for the least amount of money that these actions will have on their business. It came out, the SEC, right, the Securities and Exchange Commission, made a release on Monday that in June of this year, Michael Burry made a $1.6 billion short against the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. And so that is the stock market in general, right? The S&P 500 is a good representation of what's going on. And he took 90% of his assets and bet against it in June that it would crash. And so I don't know what the timeline on that put option was and if he's even held on to it still to this day. But in June 30th of this year, he put 90% on it to bet against it.
Welcome back to another episode of Dental Riffs. I'm your co-host, Gary Bird. I'm the founder of SMC National, where we help you create, convert, and close more new patients so you can grow the way that you want.
I am Tanner Applegate, CEO and founder of Unified Dental. We are a dental software that is helping you guys understand exactly where you need to focus for your practice.
Okay, so we got three really cool topics today, and all of these are pretty much going to impact the dental industry pretty severely. So number one, we have what's going on with AI inside of dental and really where we're missing the mark when it comes to AI. Number two, all the Inc. 5000 lists were just announced, and there was a bunch of DSOs and also other people from the dental industry on there. And then lastly, Michael Burry, who predicted the housing crash and bet against all of the houses crashing in 2008, made a ton of money. He's now shorting another market, and we're going to want to learn about that. So let's first start with the AI topic, Tanner. Where right now, from your perspective, because you're pretty knee deep in this, is dental getting AI right? And where are we just totally missing the mark on it?
So I think a lot of the use cases where I think that honestly we're leading as far as industry goes is in like diagnostics, right? The clinical side of AI. We've also gotten a lot of good traction with AI inside of tools like phone call analytics, right? We've seen a lot of that where they go and listen to the phone calls and tell you how to perform better within the phone calls, which is way better than what we used to do, which is have a bunch of people sit there and manually do it, right? There's other areas where people are attempting to use it for scheduling, right? To make scheduling a little bit more efficient and automated in that way. So I'm excited to see that one play out a little bit more. And then there's also some people trying to do it to reduce missed appointment, right? And all of these areas, I think these are very viable areas, but I still like in our conversations is especially where I see the area for opportunity though, and this is something that I think in Unify we've really decided to focus in on, is the fact that when you look at like the amount of data that you can get from a practice and the data analytics perspective, all the amount of data points that you have can become very overwhelming for people that they still don't translate this data into the action that needs to be done, right? And you're like, okay, well, let's take all these data points, run them through a machine that understands everything way better than we do and just have it spit out what we need to do instead of us trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest use cases that's sitting there being missing, right? You're sitting there saying, hey, not everybody needs a new patient. You need to understand what's going on in your office before you understand if you need new patients. Like, well, nobody's really providing that information, right? How many times have we had people reach out to us and be like, wait, so how do I decide if I need new patients or not?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Hey, sorry to interrupt the show, but I got a new segment that I wanted to share with you. It's called Ask Gary. And what we're doing is we're going over questions that you have about marketing and answering them in our podcast. So if you want to reach out to us and get your question answered and maybe even get on the podcast to have it answered live, all you have to do is DM us, leave a comment, or email us at askgary@smcnational.com. Again, that's askgary@smcnational.com. Our most recent question came in from Kristen, and her question was this: what's the single best way to generate leads and new patients? This is a great question, and I'm going to break this down for you in under a minute. So first thing that you want to understand is, do you want quality or do you want quantity? the easiest way to get quality is through patient referrals. The downside to that, though, is that you can't generate a lot of them, meaning if you need an extra 40 or 50 new patients next month, you're not going to be able to do that through generating patient referrals. On the flip side, if you want quantity, then digital is definitely the way to go, and you can measure the whole thing. And it's the easiest to get a bunch of new patients, but it does take a little bit of time to dial in the quality. And what I mean by that is that these patients don't trust you like a patient referral. A patient referral already trusts you because somebody else did the selling for you. One of your happy customers told them how great you are. So that is today's episode of Ask Gary. Contact us, reach out to us, and we will answer your questions. And again, we might even get you on the podcast. And back to the episode. Enjoy. Yeah, you're totally right. A lot of people for a long time, the dental business model was just simply get me to X amount of new patients and we're good. And that's totally changed. I was just on a podcast yesterday and we walked through why that's not the case anymore. Number one, labor costs are up. Number two, there's a hygiene shortage. So you can't just get more hygiene appointments. Number three, our COGS are up. Our cost of goods are up. Number four, patients are buying less and coming less frequently. Student debt is through the roof. So associates have to make a certain level of money and you that creates a whole nother level of complexity there. So it's not as easy as just, we're going to get more new patients and that gets us to where we want to go. You have to understand where your pitfalls are and then you have to close those pitfalls. So walk me through how AI can help solve that. Like how would AI even help with that?
Well, I think that we're a little bit of ways away from making this happen, but what happens is like there is the output that you're getting and then the cost to be able to achieve that output. And right now, if you go and get it like a data analytics platform, all they tell you is what your output is, but there's no correlation to like your HR data, your financial data to say, hey, by the way, in order to get this output, you had to spend a ton of money and you're not actually making any margin at the end. Right. And so like an example that I gave recently was like hygiene specifically. Right. Okay, I'm making 500 grand in hygiene. Great. That's amazing. But when you're spending 400 grand in order to get that 500 grand, now that 500 grand is a lot less amazing. And so understanding kind of taking these large language models, training it in all the data points and understanding kind of like, okay, if I pull this lever, here's what impacts these other tools. That's where the biggest opportunities really kind of come in and lie is like a lot of offices know what to do, but they don't know the biggest impact for the least amount of money that these actions will have on their business.
So let me give you an example and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this. Somebody might say, hey, we want to add $1 million to our practice this year and we are just going to market and get more new patients. It's going to be super simple. So just give me $1 million worth of new patients that are going to accept treatment. Well, if you don't answer the phone 35% of the time, you are now need a lot more than $1 million worth of patients. And then if you only convert 50% of those opportunities on the phone, you need even more opportunities. And then if 20 or 30% of those opportunities don't show up, then you need even more. So you're going in thinking I need $1 million of opportunity. In reality, you need closer to $2 or $3 million of opportunity when you get to case acceptance and all of those kind of things as well. But that's invisible. Like you can't really see that or pull the numbers on those things that I just listed anywhere. So the AI would help go in and solve those kind of pit holes. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, that's a good example of one of like, because really like you're saying, yeah, because you're not answering the phone 50% of the time, when what used to be $1,000 now of marketing costs are now $2,000, and you've got people standing there, your phone call costs can go up now as well, right? And so there's not just the marketing costs, but the labor costs associated with actually getting that $1 million in the space. And so, yeah, going in and measuring that, there's nowhere to do that right now, right? As for the alternative too, if your reappointment is super low, now all of a sudden that's an easy way to get it for super cheap is to say, hey, let me automatically send out text to get people reappointed and see what percentage of conversion that gets me, right? No increase in labor, no increase in marketing. All we're doing is setting up this automated software and here's the output it gets us, right?
Yeah,
so that's really what we're wanting to measure is like, what are all the different input variables that people are doing and what is the output that they're getting for it in order to help them optimize their costs.
That's awesome. Any other final thoughts on that before we move to the Inc. 5000 list in the dental industry?
Nope. Excited about it.
Okay, cool. All right. So let's talk through Inc. 5000 list. So you said there's 22 DSOs that made the list this year?
Yeah, 22. I think a couple of these might not actually be full DSOs. So I'd say about 20. But according to Becker's, yeah, we got 20 different DSOs that made the list. some of them, like Specialty One. Do you know Specialty One? Specialty One Partners is a DSO that like they just have blown up. I think they're at like 300 locations within the last like year or so, and they're just acquiring all these different specialty groups. And so I know a handful of people from Specialty One, and they top the list at number 15 in the Inc. 5000.
That's
so
really hard to do.
18,000% growth.
That's great. That's so hard to do. Like that being that high on the list as a DSO is tough. Yeah, I've never, they must have grown really fast because I've never even heard of them. So they're already on that list. That's awesome. It looks like they have over 200 practice, 320 specialists, and they're in 27 states. And they've done that pretty much over the last 18 months.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. Any other notable folks on there?
Guardian, shout out to Guardian. They've grown. They were at 305 on the list, so 1,800%. But that one's not surprising to me. I've been sitting there watching them, and they have been exploding.
Yeah, that's crazy. I know we made the list third year in a row. So first year that SMC was on the list, we were 46, 64. So just barely inked, screeched into the list in the 4,000s. And then last year we made it 2191. And this year we were 1353. So hard to make the list 3 years in a row. I don't think we'll make it a fourth just because of just the way math works in growth. Like the amount of growth that we would need to do to maintain that would be absolutely insane. But yeah, that's been pretty cool. Definitely a lot of lessons in growth on that. I've noticed there were several other vendors in the dental industry as well. We don't have that list yet, but I'm interested to see who else made the list there.
Yeah, follow up on that.
Yeah, it's cool to see people in the dental industry growing. That's really fun. So let's talk about Michael Burry. And so if people don't know, 2008 for the young people out there, that was the housing crash. Very, very scary time. It's actually when I started in business. I quit my job and I was in my early 20s, quit my job and went and started marketing. And then the housing crash hit. Businesses were shutting down left and right, especially like smaller businesses, restaurants, things like that. And everybody was losing their house. I feel like everybody knew somebody or multiple people that lost a house during that time. And it was just very commonplace. And there was a guy named Michael Burry who before that actually happened, he saw it and he said, hey, I'm going to short these housing stocks basically because people were taking these assets and rolling them up. And there was a way to actually to invest into them or bet against them. And he bet against them and he was right. And now he is betting against something else and people are kind of paying attention. Where do you see him talking about, Tanner?
Yeah. So Michael Burry, it came out, the SEC, right, the Securities and Exchange Commission, made a release on Monday that in June of this year, Michael Burry made a $1.6 billion short against the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100, right? And so that is the stock market in general, right? The S&P 500 is a good representation of what's going on. And he took 90% of his assets and bet against it in June that it would crash, right? And so I don't know what the timeline on that put option was and if he's even held on to it still to this day. But in June 30th of this year, he put 90% on it to bet against it.
Wow. That's absolutely insane. So yeah, I mean, it wouldn't take a lot for the stock market to go down. I've heard people kind of break down what would happen if there was like a tactical nuclear thing with Russia and Ukraine, what that would do to the stock market. People predicted up to 40% of a pullback. There's obviously a lot of other things going on economically that could cause it. So there's definitely a chance that the stock market pulls back. I'm curious though, 90% of his assets, that's absolutely insane.
What's interesting though, is if you look at his track record in 2008, when he made a bet against the housing market, it wasn't in 2008 that he made the bet and then all of a sudden it collapsed. He made the bet in 2005.
Yeah.
Right. So it took 3 years for it to come to fruition and he sat there and waited. Right. And so a lot of people are saying, okay, good. This gives us a 3-year timeline before the stock market implodes. So at least I know what I can do between the next 3 years. But I just think it was interesting that he was willing to gamble such a big bet on the stock market in general. I mean, because the problem is if it goes up, there is no cap on a put option. as to how much money he could lose.
Oh yeah, it's infinite, right? So you can lose a lot. You can lose an infinite amount of money. Yeah, because when you buy a stock, it can only go to zero. So if I buy a stock for $100, the most I can lose is $100. But when you're betting against stocks and the market goes up, let's say we have the presidential election and someone gets in office and the economy explodes, yeah, you could potentially lose infinite amount of money. So that's an interesting bet, and I'm sure a lot of people will be paying attention to it.
If you were to look at the data as of right now, for June 30th, we were at 4450 for the S&P 500, and right now we are at 4489. So we've barely gone up, but it's pretty flat.
Yeah, interesting stuff, man. All right, well, good talk.
All right, man. Chat with you soon.
Peace.